It started as just another ordinary afternoon in the quiet town of Maplewood, where neighbors still looked out for each other. And kindness wasn't just a word, it was a way of life. 17-year-old Jake Turner never thought that a simple act of generosity would change his life forever. But life has a strange way of surprising people when they least expect it. Jake had just finished his shift at the local grocery store when he spotted Mr. Evans, his elderly neighbor, struggling to carry a bag of groceries up his front steps. The old man looked thinner than usual, his face pale and his movements slower than before. Jake jogged over, offering a hand without a second thought. "Let me help you with that, Mr. Evans," he said, lifting the bag with ease. The older man sighed, a weary smile on his face. "Ah, Jake, you're a good kid, always helping out." Jake had known Mr. Evans for as long as he could remember. The man had lived next door to his family for years, often seen tending to his garden or sitting on his porch with a cup of tea. But lately, things had changed. The garden was overgrown. The once vibrant flowers now wilted. The rocking chair on the porch sat empty most days. It didn't take much to realize that something was wrong. As Jake set the groceries down inside, he noticed a stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter. Some were unopened, others marked with urgent notices. His stomach twisted. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked cautiously. Mr. Evans chuckled, though there was no real joy behind it. Just an old man dealing with old man problems. Nothing to worry about. But Jake could see the truth. The man was struggling, not just physically, but financially too, and it didn't sit right with him. That night, as Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the image of Mr. Evans sitting alone in that dimly lit house. He had always been the type of person to step up when someone needed help. But what could he do? Then he remembered something. His birthday was in 2 days. His parents had already promised him some money as a gift, enough to buy the new sneakers he had been eyeing for months. He had been saving up for them, counting the days until he could finally walk into the store and buy them with his own money. But now, as he thought about Mr. Evans, the idea of new shoes seemed insignificant. When his birthday finally arrived, his parents handed him an envelope with a warm smile. "Happy birthday, kiddo," his dad said, ruffling his hair. Jake hesitated for a moment before taking it. He knew what he was about to do, and while a part of him felt a pang of disappointment, a much stronger part knew it was the right thing. Later that afternoon, he walked over to Mr. Evans's house, with the envelope in hand. The old man looked surprised to see him. "Back again already?" Jake held out the envelope. "I know it's not much, but I want you to have this." Mr. Evans' brow furrowed. "What is this?" "My birthday money," Jake said, shifting on his feet. "I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, and I want to help." For a long moment, Mr. Evans just stared at him. His hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope, his eyes misting over. "Jake, I can't take this," he whispered. "Yes, you can," Jake insisted. "Please." The old man swallowed hard, looking away as if trying to gather himself. Finally, he nodded. "You have no idea what this means to me." Jake smiled, feeling lighter than he had in days. "I just hope it helps." And with that, he turned and walked back home, not expecting anything in return. To him, it was just the right thing to do. But fate had other plans. Months passed, and life went on. Jake got busy with school, friends, and the usual ups and downs of teenage life. He still checked in on Mr. Evans from time to time, but the man had become more reclusive, his health worsening with each passing week. Then, one chilly morning, Jake's mother walked into the kitchen with an unreadable expression on her face. "Sweetheart, I have some news," she said carefully. Mr. Evans passed away last night. Jake felt a lump form in his throat, even though he had known. The man was sick. Hearing those words made it real in a way he wasn't ready for. The funeral was small, just a handful of neighbors and distant relatives. Jake sat quietly, remembering the kind old man who always had a story to tell, who once let him pick tomatoes from his garden just because he asked. He wished he had done more. A week later, something unexpected happened. A lawyer showed up at their doorstep, holding a neatly folded piece of paper. "I'm here regarding Mr. Evans's will," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "Your son might want to hear this." Jake's heart pounded as he sat down, his parents watching with confusion. The lawyer cleared his throat, unfolding the paper. Before he passed, Mr. Evans made some changes to his will. And, well, Jake, he left something for you. Jake blinked. "Me?" The lawyer nodded, reading aloud the words that would change everything. And as Jake listened, his world tilted in a way he never could have imagined. Jake sat frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Mr. Evans had left something for him. It didn't make sense. He had barely known the man beyond their small conversations and occasional acts of kindness. Sure, he had given him his birthday money, but that wasn't anything grand. It was just the right thing to do. His parents looked equally confused, but the lawyer remained calm, his eyes scanning the document in his hands. Mr. Evans specified in his will that Jake should receive something very personal to him. The lawyer explained. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a smaller envelope. "This is for you." Jake hesitated before taking it, his fingers trembling slightly. He could feel something inside. A folded piece of paper, maybe a letter. His heart pounded as he carefully opened it. The first thing he saw was his own name, written in shaky but familiar handwriting. "Jake, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if I know anything about you, it's that you're probably wondering why an old man like me would leave you anything at all. The truth is, you gave me something money couldn't buy. Kindness. When you handed me that envelope, you didn't just give me your birthday money. You gave me hope. You reminded me that I wasn't alone. That gesture, small as it may have, seemed to you, meant everything to me. And now I want to return the favor." Jake swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the rest of the letter. "I don't have much, but what I do have, I want you to have. You'll find the details with my lawyer. Take care of yourself, kid, and never stop being the kind person you are." Jake slowly lowered the letter, his chest tight. He had never expected anything in return. And yet here he was, holding the last words of a man who had lived right next door, but had in many ways been a stranger to him. The lawyer cleared his throat. "In addition to the letter, Mr. Evans also left you ownership of his house." Jake's head snapped up. "What?" His parents exchanged stunned glances. "He made it clear that he wanted you to have it." The lawyer continued. "He had no immediate family left, and he trusted you more than anyone else." Jake felt like the air had been knocked out of him. The old house next door, the place he had only ever seen from the outside, the place that had once been full of life but had grown quiet in recent years, was now his. He barely knew what to say. I don't understand," Jake muttered. "Why would he give it to me?" The lawyer gave him a small smile. "Sometimes the people who have the least give the most. He saw something in you, Jake. He knew you'd take care of what mattered to him." For the next few days, Jake couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he looked at the house next door, it felt different now. It wasn't just an old neighbor's home anymore. It was a part of his story, a piece of his life he had never expected. At first, he wasn't sure what to do with it. He was still in high school, still living at home. His parents suggested selling it, But something about that didn't sit right with him. This wasn't just a house. It was Mr. Evans' life, his memories. And now, in some strange way, it was a responsibility Jake wasn't ready to walk away from. So one afternoon, he decided to go inside. The house smelled like old books and faded wood, a scent that somehow felt both familiar and distant. Dust particles danced in the air as sunlight streamed through the lace curtains. The furniture was neatly arranged, though it was clear no one had been here for a while. Jake ran his fingers over a bookshelf, noticing a collection of old journals stacked neatly in the corner. Curiosity got the best of him, and he pulled one out, flipping through its pages. That's when he realized this wasn't just any journal. It was Mr. Evans' life. The pages were filled with notes, letters, even sketches of the garden that had once thrived outside. There were stories about his late wife, about the travels they had taken, about the dreams they had built together in this very house. But as Jake kept reading, something else caught his attention. One entry, dated just a year ago, stood out. I know my time is running out. The doctors don't say it, but I can feel it. And yet, the thing that keeps me awake at night isn't fear of what's coming. It's regret. I spent so much of my life chasing things that in the end didn't matter. I pushed people away when I should have held them close. Now I sit in a house filled with memories, but no one to share them with. Maybe that's why Jake's kindness meant so much. He didn't hesitate. He just cared. Maybe it's not too late to do something right. Jake's throat tightened. He had always thought of Mr. Evans as just a quiet old man who kept to himself. But now, reading these words, he realized there was so much more to him than he had ever known. As he turned the pages, another thought crept into his mind. What if this house wasn't just a burden? What if it was an opportunity? The idea took hold slowly, then all at once. Maybe he wasn't meant to sell the house. Maybe he was meant to do something with it. Something that mattered. But what? As he stood in the center of the old living room, surrounded by the echoes of a life that had once been full, an idea started forming in his mind. Something that would honor Mr. Evans. Something that would bring life back into these walls. He just didn't know yet that the choice he was about to make would change not just his own future, but the lives of so many others. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Evans's house was meant for something bigger. Selling it felt wrong, and leaving it empty felt even worse. But what could he do? He was just a high school kid, not someone who knew anything about managing a house or making big decisions. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. The journals, the memories, the quiet regret in Mr. Evans's words. It all pointed to one thing. He had been lonely. He had lived in a home filled with love once. But in the end, he had no one to share it with. And then it hit him. What if this house could become a place where no one felt alone? A place where people had someone to turn to, just like Mr. Evans had needed. The idea started as a simple thought, but the more he considered it, the more it made sense. There were so many people in their town. Elderly neighbors, struggling families, even kids at school, who could use a little kindness, just like Mr. Evans had. Jake didn't waste time. The next morning, he brought it up to his parents. "I want to turn Mr. Evans's house into something meaningful," he said, his voice firm. "A community space, a place where people can come together, help each other out." His parents exchanged uncertain looks. "That's a big responsibility, Jake," his dad said. "Are you sure you can handle something like that?" Jake nodded. "I don't know everything, but I know this house meant something, and I think it can mean something to a lot more people." His parents didn't shut him down. Instead, they gave him a chance to prove it. And so, he did. It started small. He reached out to neighbors, friends, even his teachers at school. He explained his idea, using the house as a space where people could gather, share meals, help those in need. Some were skeptical at first, but the more people heard about it, the more they wanted to be part of it. Retired carpenter offered to fix up the place. A local baker volunteered to donate food. Other students helped clean, paint, and organize. Slowly, Mr. Evans's house transformed. The overgrown garden was brought back to life. The dusty living room became a space where people could sit and talk. Shelves were stocked with books. Warm meals were shared at the old wooden table, and laughter filled the halls. What had once been an empty house was now a home again, not for one person, but for many. Jake could hardly believe it. What started as a simple act of kindness had turned into something so much bigger. People who had barely spoken before were now looking out for one another. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. An older woman, who had been coming to the house regularly, pulled Jake aside. "You know," she said with a soft smile, "I used to know Mr. Evans when we were younger. He was a good man, but he always kept to himself. I think he would have loved this." Jake felt a lump in his throat. "I hope so," he said. The woman patted his shoulder. "He would be proud of you, Jake. He really would." That night, Jake sat on the front steps of the house, watching as people came and went, chatting, helping, sharing. He thought about Mr. Evans, about how a single decision had led to all of this. Maybe life had a way of working things out. Maybe, sometimes, the smallest choices, like giving away birthday money, could lead to something far greater than anyone could imagine. As the sun set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Jake smiled to himself. Mr. Evans had left him a house, and in return, Jake had filled it with life again.